And it's championship week here on Panther-Lair.com as we continue our preview of Pitt-Wake Forest this Saturday in the ACC title game. Today we got Conor O'Neill from DeaconsIllustrated.com, who covers Wake Forest for the Rivals.com network. And Conor, I think the first reaction I have to this game is probably the same reaction everyone's had of, Pitt-Wake Forest, just like we all predicted in the preseason, right? I mean, like realistically, and I don't know what you thought about Pitt at that time, but, back in August, where did you think Wake would stack up in the Atlantic? Everybody was fighting for second place, but how much did you think Wake would actually compete even for second place, 4 months ago?
So I picked them fourth. I've kind of had that in mind here as the season took shape. I reminded myself of that. I had an idea that if things went right and if Wake did the things that they say they were going to do, that maybe not this kind of season could happen, but a special season could happen. I just needed to see it. Like, we've heard for a few years that Wake was going to develop depth, and developing depth was going to help them avoid injuries. But they've said that, and then it hasn't followed through and come to fruition. And that's how they wound up with, 2 years ago in 2019, they were 7-1 and got to the CFP rankings for the first time ever, and they fell off a cliff. They went 1-4 down the stretch. This year they followed through. I mean, they played a ton of guys in those first two games. Fall camp was really balanced, and you saw a second team and even a third team rolling in, and it kind of it played out, and you're able to see, like, okay, they said they were going to do this, and they said that this was going to help them be able to win games in November, be able to win tough games in October, and it actually came to fruition. And then it's been some individual growth. I mean, who could have seen Sam Hartman with, I think, what is he up to, like 41 or 43 touchdowns responsible for at this point? I mean, that was the other factor that I kind of trumpeted in the preseason was, Wake's team goal was going good to great. Like, they've had all these good seasons, but they were waiting on kind of their great season and their breakout season. I kind of took it a step further and said Sam Hartman would have to go from being a good quarterback to a great quarterback. College football, it's all about the quarterback, and I'm sure Kenny Pickett has illustrated that pretty well. I thought Sam had to take the next step, and he has, and it's shown all year, really.
Tell me about his background a little bit. I mean, we can go look at his Rivals profile or whatever, but what's sort of the quick biography of Sam Hartman, getting to Wake Forest and kind of his progression since he arrived?
Man, there is no quick biography on Sam. That kid lived a full life in high school. I'll start with his sophomore years. He transferred. He was at one Charlotte area private school as a freshman, didn't play as much as he thought he was going to. As a sophomore, he transferred to a school called Davidson Day, where the coach is Chad Greer, who is the father of Will Greer, the former West Virginia quarterback.
Right.
Sam transferred there as a sophomore. They went to the state championship. The week of the state championship, his adopted brother was a receiver at Elon, and he took his own life, which was a tragedy,
right?
Obviously. And Sam played in the state championship game 2 days later. He changed his number to his adopted brother's number 10, and that's been his number for his career since then. And he went out and threw for like 300 yards and 4 touchdowns to win the state championship. Just the kind of stuff that you don't even, if you script that for a Hollywood movie, it's like, okay, this is unbelievable. He caught a weird thyroid disease before his junior season. So like when his recruiting profile is kind of blowing up in that summer between sophomore and junior year, he all of a sudden lost like 80 pounds and was hospitalized.
Oh, jeez.
he came back like 4 weeks after he was in the hospital. He came back and played their season opener and threw for a ton of yards, played at like 135 pounds, I want to say. I knew all this a lot better in 2018 when he was a freshman because it was all fresh.
Yeah, sure.
You know, now I've got 4 years of covering him as a college player in the mind here. He had a great season. They didn't have the same type of state championship run that they did the previous year. The school folded after his junior season. It was a private school that basically, my impression was they had enjoyed the success of the football program, but they didn't enjoy all of the distractions that came with being a high profile football program. And then there's the school off to the side. So they started the football program, and Chad Greer went down to Oceanside Prep Collegiate Academy in north of Charleston, South Carolina, who was in their second year of even having a football program. They had gone winless the year before. So Sam followed Chad down there, and that's where Sam played as a senior in high school, so that he could play for Chad. And they went like 7-3. Sam was one of the 3 featured quarterbacks on the show, on the Netflix show QB1. He's in there in the same season as Justin Fields.
Okay.
And so that's kind of, you know, it's like the senior year was the least eventful year, and it was the year that he had to move to another state and play for a second year program,
right.
and went 7-3 for him.
And so, I mean, much recruiting interest, you know, outside, I mean, obviously Wake, but I mean, you know, who else was really after him, you know, that you recall?
He committed really, really early to Wake. Like, Wake doesn't take very many early commits, but they make an exception for quarterbacks. If they see a quarterback that they like as a sophomore, they'll try to jump in and be their first offer and really go hard after them and have them committed for a year or two before signing day. I think Sam he might have committed that summer between sophomore and junior year, and it was basically it. Like, Sam, I know his dad went to Wake Forest. His mom might have some Wake Forest background also. So when he got the Wake Forest, it was a pretty short flirtation, and then it was a commitment. And
right.
I don't think he really entertained offers from anyone and from anyone else.
Sure. And then, you know, his progression to this point, I mean, you know, this is an outstanding season that he's having, obviously, and the numbers back that up. His performance backs him up. I mean, in a very crowded group of ACC quarterbacks, I mean, he stands out as close to the top as any of them. You know what I mean? It's sort of a testament to this, the strength of this league, that, I mean, you just keep going guy after guy after guy after guy. There's about 8 or 9 really good quarterbacks in this conference. I mean, was this always seen as what his ceiling could be? I mean, obviously everybody thinks, you know, every recruiting class is full of All-Americans, but, you know, coming out of high school and then over, you know, through the early stages of his career at Wake Forest, I mean, was this seen as sort of his potential and his ceiling?
We saw glimpses of this when he started 9 games as a freshman in 2018. The game against Pitt was so late in the season that year that he actually didn't play in that game. He had broken a bone in his foot a couple weeks before then against Syracuse.
Right.
His biggest hurdle was he played as a true freshman, and he played at about 175 pounds. And that year, you could just tell, like, the first time he got hit in a game and really, really hit, he was not the same quarterback for the next, like, at least 2 or 3 series. Like, it would take him a good little while to kind of pick himself up. The games that they were able to protect him, he threw the ball all over the place. Like, he threw his only ACC win that year was at Louisville, and that was when Bobby Petrino and that entire staff hated each other and was on the way out. I mean, Sam threw for a ton of yards there and a couple touchdowns. But he had to gain weight to be able to be an ACC quarterback and to be effective. And that's basically what he did. You know, he grew up when Jamie Newman kind of stepped in at the end of 2018 and won 3 of 4. And then when Jamie Newman was the starter in 2019, Sam took some mental leaps forward in being able to deal with that, being able to kind of handle the adversity of having the job and losing the job and fighting for the job and not winning it back. But even more than that, like Sam is now up to like 210, 215 pounds. Like, he is a legitimate ACC quarterback who can run. He's not a power runner like Sam Howell turned into this year. He's certainly not beating Malik Cunningham in any foot races, but he's mobile. Like, if he gets out in the open field, he can chew up some yards in a scramble. And more importantly, you know, the RPO, the slow mesh, the one thing it does to a quarterback is you're going to take some hits. Like, you need to stand in there, and even when you hand the ball to the running back, Sam does it. Jamie Newman did it before him. You shield that backside guy coming down the line, and you get hit in the back by that guy more often than not. Right. So you need to be able to handle that. And as a freshman, Sam couldn't. I think he would be the first to tell you he couldn't. Now he can. You know, now it's kind of fun to see him. You know, it's always fun to see quarterbacks try to lead block, but you know, it actually looks like there's a football player out there trying to lead block instead of like a toothpick, which would have been the case when he was a freshman.
Right. I think, you know, going into this game, and we've seen it with Pitt for a few games, you know, certainly against Carolina and against Virginia, the storyline going in is just quarterback versus quarterback. It's Pickett versus Howell. It's Pickett versus Armstrong. You know, this Saturday it's Pickett versus Hartman. I mean, this is the premier sort of showcase. I mean, do you have any reason to think this game won't look like, I mean, from Wake's schedule, like the Carolina game, like 58-55 or like NC State 45-42? I mean, is there any, you know, anything that makes you believe that this game won't be played in the 40s? You know what I mean?
See, I think that's the recipe that Wake needs to have a good chance of winning. I respect Pitt's defense. Like, I think Pitt can create pressure. And I think if this game is kept in the 20s or 30s, I think that's the game that Pitt wants to play. And I think that's what I would say we have a better chance of seeing a score in the 30s than seeing a score in the 50s. Wake's defense is finicky. I mean, it is very inconsistent. You can go look at it and say that, well, they gave up 48 points to a terrible Clemson offense. They gave up 58 points to a UNC team that went 6-6. They had a really good game against NC State. The score 42 points given up against NC State does not tell you that, but that was one kick return touchdown, another kick return that put the ball inside Wake's 30, and they scored on the first play. Wake's offense gave the ball away 3 times. I think, well, NC State didn't score on any of those, so that didn't factor into the scoring. But the defense for Wake played a lot better against NC State than you would be led to believe if you're just looking at the scores.
Right.
Their defense played great against BC. It comes with a caveat that I think Phil Dracovic was so heavily affected by A, having the flu last week, and B, that wrist injury still seemed to be such an issue for him. I mean, he just couldn't get the ball down the field. Wake's defense, I mean, they played Brennan Armstrong better than anybody else on Virginia's schedule other than Notre Dame's defense. Like, Wake's defense is capable. They've had some really bad games. Where they've been susceptible is the run defense. So you look at a Pitt offense that, do they even really want to run the ball? Like, I think they want to run the ball a little more than Virginia. Like, Virginia was running the ball out of necessity and requirement, basically, because they didn't want Brennan Armstrong to throw the ball 80 times. I think Pitt wants to run the ball a little more than that, but it doesn't seem like much, right?
No, not a whole lot. Even though they've shown themselves to be somewhat capable at times, they still go away from it. Even in situations where you say, boy, this is the right time to run, they're still dropping it back to pass. I mean, as far as, Wake's offense, though, I mean, I'm just, again, looking just at the scores. I mean, Clemson's the only team that held them under 30, right? What, aside from Clemson just having a lot of talent, was there anything Clemson was able to do or take away from the Wake offense to keep that, to hold them to their lowest output of the season?
The one thing Clemson has that nobody else has in the ACC is Brent Venables, and that guy has the formula to beat a Warren Ruggiero offense. And I was having conversations with people in July at ACC kickoff, and they were telling me that, they were telling me Clemson is gettable. Like, Clemson, this might be the year. They've got so many new pieces, and Wake has such an experienced team, and that's going to be a huge game in November. And I just looked at them and, like, the day that Wake Forest offense is able to move the ball against a Brent Venables defense is the day I'll believe they can actually do it. Until they do it, there's no faith that they're able to move the ball against that defense. It's all about A-gap pressure, and Clemson, with just a turnstile of NFL type defensive tackles, is able to just blow up everything from the middle. And rewatching that game from a couple weeks ago, you just get such an appreciation for, I gotta throw a shout out to Greg McElroy. It was his word on the broadcast, not mine. The choreography of blitzes and everybody getting home at the same time is incredible to watch. It's just incredible. And I like Pitt and their defense and their ability to create pressure. Like, I had Kalijah Kancey on my first team All ACC ballot, and I think I had two of the linebackers on my All ACC teams. But I think Brent Venables does things better than everybody else in the league, and I'm curious if Pitt sees what Clemson was able to do pressure wise and is able to repeat it, or even if they try to repeat it.
Yeah. I mean, they've been very susceptible to RPOs. It's just eating them alive. And it seems like Wake Forest runs it as well as anyone, which seems like, if Pitt's not going to change the basic structure of their defense, they're going to either have to get in the backfield a lot, or they're going to get torched. You know what I mean? Which is why I sort of feel like this might get played in the 40s, because I have a lot of faith in Pitt's offense, and I have seen this Pitt defense get beat by this kind of thing. You know what I mean? The kind of thing that Wake Forest seems to be able to do really, really well. And it's not the kind of thing that anybody can just drop into their offense in any given week. It's something you have to practice and get good at. And so that's why the teams that are really good at it are pretty scary for Pitt's defense. I don't like putting other reporters on the spot, but I mean, we're sitting here chatting, so I will. I mean, what do you think happens on? I know you said you think this one might stick in the 20s or 30s, but what do you think happens on Saturday night in Charlotte?
Man, now that you say that, I don't think this game's in the 20s. I mean, I put out there that I think the over/under should be about 80.
Yeah, same here. Same here.
It's a lot of this depends on what Wake Forest defense shows up. If the Wake Forest defense that played against Virginia and played like about half of the games, maybe 7 out of 12, if it's the bend don't break defense that keeps everything in front of them, and the explosive plays are limited to only like 15 to 20 yards at a time rather than 30, 40, 50. Like, Carolina was able to break out the 50-yard runs and the long passes. it wasn't even Josh Downs. It was the other guys on the outside, which was even more embarrassing. And it really was the rushing game. I mean, the 2 games Wake lost, they gave up 330 and 333 yards on the ground. If Wake is able to keep the explosive plays in front of them, just elongate Pitt's drives, I think that gives them a better chance to win. I mean, I'm an idiot. We're probably bound to see a 42-38 type of game.
Don't back off it, man. I mean, if you believe this one's going to stick in the 30s, I mean, maybe it will. Look, I mean, Pitt and Carolina. I think Pitt and Carolina might have been right after the Wake Carolina game, and I'm like, yep, it's going to be another 58-55 game. These two teams are going to go up and down the field. It's 23-23 at the end of regulation. You know what I mean? So one team touched 30 because they played in overtime. So you never know. Or, a week later they play Virginia and it ends up being 48-38 like we all expected, an 80-point game, 86 points. So, who knows? It's anything can happen on any given week, I suppose. But, well, Conor, I mean, that's great stuff. I really appreciate your insight into Wake Forest. And I think it'll be interesting. I think there's a lot of sort of chess match to happen here. Wake has some things they do that they're very good at. And if Pitt can't figure it out by now, then, this might be a long night in Charlotte. And the other thing too, with this game, this thing might take like 5 hours. I mean, between like TV commercials and like 80 some passes between these two games, like you're not getting out of there before midnight. I guess I would say that game's not ending before midnight. So that's the other angle to look at. Right. But all right, man. Well, thanks again so much. I really appreciate it. Thanks for your time and enjoy the game on Saturday night.
Thanks, Chris. I appreciate it.